This is a big issue on 97.3 CTFM and on ChannelOne television. I am Umaru Sandamado. On the big issue every weekend, we assemble the big stories and assemble the big experts to talk about the big issue of the week. And do we have the big stories this week to talk about and the big persons to talk about them? Yes, we do. And today, a very, very big issue happening all the way from the United States of America, New York, to be more specific, the very tall UN General Assembly building, where a meeting was had, a decision was made, a vote was taken, and Ghana has won, or has it not? One of the persons who led the charge for Ghana is my guest today, and one of the people who thought, no, that vote should not go the way that it ought to go, is also my guest in studio. And we also talk about this whole issue about sole sourcing. Has the government reneged on its own promise in the award of contracts to on road projects in the big push? I have a former minister for road who understands how these things work, and he'll be speaking with me. And I have a member of parliament from the opposition party as well to have a conversation with on this matter. Then I have a journalist who works as an investigative journalist, properly aligned with the Fourth Estate that did that, will be joining me, and who is also against the reparation victory that was chalked in the New York or in the US. Not against in the sense that he does not think we should be repatriated, but he believes that we were contributory to what happened. And so let the blame affect both. This is a big issue on 97.3 CTFM. I introduce my panelists. When we come back, please stay.
Meet the Blanksons.
Meet Papa Blankson, the big man. Always talking big, never following plan. Meet Mama Blankson, fire in her hands. She carries the whole house, she gives the commands. Every day is a...
This week, Frema Edunyame steps into the world of the Blanksons family on the Upside Down Show. It's drama, surprises, and moments you won't see coming.
Hello, the Blanksons. Don't you love them already? You know, whose character really looked like them?
I think him.
Yeah. Hey. Mrs. Blankson, how would you describe your character?
I would say Mrs. Blankson is the keeper of the home. She's the one who pushes things behind the scenes and makes things, like she just makes the things in the home all come together. So, like they say, behind every successful man, there's a woman.
Mr. Blankson, was there a point throughout the entire shoot that you felt, I wish I wasn't doing this?
It didn't have to do with the content.
Okay.
It had to do with the time.
Okay.
The ungodly hours. I said, Ubia Obaka show.
Make a date this Sunday at 7 p.m. only on the Upside Down Show on ChannelOne TV.
You're welcome back. This is a big issue on 97.3 CTFM and on ChannelOne television. Let me introduce my guest now. And I'm wearing a smock, which is something the president wore when he addressed the UN General Assembly last year. Now, I have another person wearing a smock in studio this morning. Clearly, the two of us have not been to Zambia, and we don't know how these things work. So that's why we are wearing blouse on a Saturday morning. So, interestingly, he and I speak two languages, apart from English. So he speaks a certain version of ever known as Tong, which is the one along the Volta River, and then also speaks Dangbe. Now, he steals keys from police cars. I don't do that. So, Oliver Bakavomawo, you're welcome.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I want to describe you as a trouble causer or a demonstrator general.
If that's your view of it, that's fair. I mean, I've always been consistent that people are entitled to how they appreciate and apprehend a person, they're able to qualify them as such.
Yeah, but how are you doing?
It's been...
People saw photos of you in New York and everybody is talking about it, that hey, Oliver is part of the government WhatsApp group. How do you respond to that?
Listen, my positions on these issues have been very clear for a very long time. New York is a very familiar place. I lived there and worked for the UN Office of Legal Affairs for many years. So I was happy to be back there. As far as my service to government has been concerned, I've worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was Assistant Director of the International Law Division, and these are issues that I'm passionate about.
Okay.
If my service is called upon to be able to advise government on, irrespective of whichever government, it's service to the nation, I'm happy to do that.
Let me introduce my next guest. His Excellency Rune Skinnebach, EU Ambassador to Ghana. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, that's perfect.
Is that where is that name from? Skinnebach.
The Skinnebach is referring to it means shining hill in Danish, and it refers to my great-grandfather's farm, which was on the west coast, and the last thing that was enlightened by the sun before it went down.
Beautiful, in Denmark.
In Denmark.
How are you finding Ghana? You just took up this position about a few months ago. How are you finding Ghana?
Oh, I'm finding Ghana lovely. It's an easy place to land. For me, it's a return. I also had my first job here ever 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very happy to be back.
You don't look that old, so when you say for 30 years ago?
You should tell my wife.
Oh. You're welcome. It's good to have you here, Your Excellency. Alhaji Inus Husseini served in various portfolios, started as Deputy Minister for Energy, became Minister for Road, Minister for Lands, Minister for, which other portfolio did you hold? Tamale Central Member of Parliament. He decided, and I always make this point that very few MPs refuse to go back to Parliament, and this man here is one of them. He decided, Minkobium. Alhaji Inus Husseini, you're welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
How are you, father-in-law?
Oh, my son-in-law, I'm good.
Hope the week has been good. Eid Mubarak to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I was on the Facebook, and I saw a post by somebody, Umar, from Niger.
Okay.
So when I came here 2 weeks ago, two weeks before the Eid,
Yes.
and someone was who's other than you,
Yes.
I thought you had traveled to Niger. So when I saw the post, I thought it was you.
Maybe to go and buy onions.
No.
I think we buy onions from Niger. No. I've never been to Niger, actually. I've never been to Niamey in my life. Maybe I should do. I've done a tour of West Africa and West Africa, but I haven't done the northern part yet. I should try and do that.
I may try to do that.
Maybe you should go together. Let me use your Jeep. I've seen that you're driving a very new Jeep.
Oh, yeah.
Do I have my guests on Zoom? Because I have a few over there. Manesseh Awuni is my colleague journalist. He was my SRC president at the Ghana Institute of Journalism. I would be joining him. Franklin Kujo is president of Imani Africa. He will be joining us. The Member of Parliament, NPP Member of Parliament for Suame, the Honorable John Dakum, is joining us in a jiffy. And also Professor Kojo Gavua, who is a lecturer at the University of Archaeology and Heritage Studies. Now that I have told you who are joining me and told you what topics we are going to talk about, let's get into it. This week, the major issue that came from the world affairs, apart from the Iran and Israel war, is the fact that the slavery that took place affecting black people, Africans, has been recorded in the UN General Assembly as one of the gravest crimes against humanity. Our President John Dramani Mahama went to call for that vote, and he succeeded. Our correspondent at the presidency, Akosia Ochri, followed him to New York, and she has a summary of what happened.
The resolution was adopted despite opposition from the United States, Israel, and Argentina, and also abstentions from 52 countries, including the UK and members of the European Union. Even though there was an acknowledgement of historical injustices inflicted on Africa, the US made it clear it will not support the move.
That the text of this resolution remains highly problematic in countless respects. Consequently, the United States cannot support the adoption of this resolution. We regret that the United States must once again remind this body that the United Nations exists to maintain international peace and security. It was not founded to advance narrow, specific interests and agendas, to establish niche international days, or to create new costly meeting and reporting mandates.
Despite the pushback, President John Mahama defended his stance.
I stood in this exact place and served notice that Ghana will move a motion to declare the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity. This current draft resolution is a result of months of consultation and consensus building by continental bodies, nations, experts, scholars, and jurists, with the sole aim of achieving a united front and grounding the final outcome in truth, compassion, and moral conscience, remembrance, education, and dialogue.
Ghana's Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa said the resolution underscores the need for accountability for centuries of enslavement and colonization.
We have advanced the cause of justice, and we have done that so emphatically. Those who voted in favor, 123 member states of the United Nations. 52 abstained, and only 3 voted against. This is an emphatic victory for justice. And our ancestors, Africans, and all people of African descent are today honored that our humanity and our dignity have been restored. Let me, on behalf of the African Group, express our profound appreciation to all member states who supported this resolution. We wish to thank those who engaged in its consideration in a spirit of dialogue, reflection, and good faith. We acknowledge that views differed during this process, and we note the positions taken by delegations that were not in a position to support the resolution at this time.
While the resolution does not specify a particular mechanism for reparations, it urges member states to take concrete steps towards atonement, which may include financial compensation, debt cancellation, development assistance, and the return of looted cultural artifacts.
So that's a report by Akosia Autry, our correspondent at the presidency. She followed the president to New York. Another person who was in New York, and I'm going to start the conversation with him. Honorable John Daku, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Professor Gavua, you're also welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Manesseh Azure, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great. So I have my panel set. Franklin Kujo will be joining us in a bit. Let me start with Oliver Bakavoma. Did you go there as a lawyer representing Ghana to go and push our agenda, or you went there as a fan of this whole agenda to go and support? What was your role, and what is this reparation agenda about?
I went there as both. I went there, I've been involved in the conversations around the resolution that Ghana has presented. Has been involved in conversation with some of the diplomatic representations there towards negotiations for this resolution and garnering support among member states to be able to get us across the finish line. So in many respects, one is also to react to developments in New York. We hosted a high-level panel discussion the day before, and then the votes which happened in the General Assembly on the 25th. So yeah, so that's the context.
So are you working for government or with government?
That's very, I'm not sure I know what the distinction is.
Okay.
I think that we all have the service, perhaps even on
okay,
this.
So what I meant was that so the government invited you that, listen, you have expertise in this, come with us. So okay, that's what you went to do. Great, great. What is this agenda about, and why does it matter now?
Well, I mean, I think that it's a historic, we have to view all of this in a historical continuum in terms of whether or not when the first slaves were captured from our shores, that even in terms of the slave resistance on the slave boats, in terms of the efforts that is taken to be able to abolish slavery, the slave trade first, then subsequently the abolishment of slavery in many countries. Remind yourself that the United States went to war, had a civil war over the question of the slavery. To decolonization in our continent that Ghana led so many years, to us joining the United Nations. And to getting us here has been a long historical battle about setting right what has, always been wrong in many respects. So the conversations, what has happened, the mobilization on the continent and trying to get slavery becoming part of the crimes against humanity. But the question of the transatlantic slave trade itself has not, been a subject of votes at the United Nations, and this is one of the things that Ghana has been talking about for a very long time, and to bring this to vote has been significant. But why now? There's not a particular chosen moment. It's an addition on to what has historically been done in order to get us to a point. And I don't think that this ends even the conversation. The frameworks that we are talking about, the reparative justice framework that needs to be put in place, is going to continue and perhaps going to outlive us. The intention behind bringing this and moving this forward is that the conversations do not become stale, that the memory continues to remain fresh, and that the actions and efforts that are put in place to continue to preserve the memory of what has happened and to continue to remind ourselves that never again are always going to be something that I think that this country is probably going to stay in the forefront of. We've seen countries in the Caribbean, for instance, CARICOM, which had a 10-point plan with respect to how reparations ought to be done. And so the conversation on how we move this forward is still going to be a key part of the conversation for a long time.
Before we talk about how the reparation will look, when we describe this as a grievous crime against humanity, and then what?
Well, I think that the political recognition is important because these are persons, millions of people that took place over almost 400 years, whose lives were dehumanized. And there has never been at a point in time where we recognize the humanity of these persons in a significant way. It is fine and dandy that we say that enslavement is a crime against humanity. The Rome Statute, for instance, talks about this. But that to get to a point in recognition that we understand not only the significance but also the scale of the slave trade is important. Now, I wanted to put something also in context. I feel like we're in a time in the world where the global world order is being redefined. If you look at McCartney, the Canadian Prime Minister's comments in Davos, where he was talking about the role and complicity of middle powers and watching the system that has continuously dispossessed the global south, and to recognize that role is a vision of what the new world order should be. You saw Marco Rubio's comments in Berlin, where he was saying that no, the West should not apologize for colonization or slavery, and that any agenda that views those as wrong is a communist agenda, and that they must continue Western civilization must continue to benefit from the dispossession of the global south. That's a global view of his own that he received a standing ovation for in Europe. Now, our president has been championing a different vision of international relations, which is an order which is built on empathy, which is built on recognition of the humanity of everybody else. And part of that global agenda of revisiting and reshaping the world history, Ghana has put forth a new order of how we should define the tomorrow. A key component of that conversation then has been that, okay, because of the significant way in which the transatlantic slave trade shaped the world, we should actually be defining world history in those terms. There's the pre-transatlantic slave trade and there's the post. It shaped what we have become countries to be. There's so many islands that would not even be countries in the proper so-called, but for the transatlantic slave trade. The economies that have grown on the back of unpaid slave labor that has defined themselves and become global world powers and have never paid homage and understood its significance. That is an important conversation. Our continuous project of decolonization has not ended. Even in the UN, we still have the Trusteeship Council, where there's a tutel form, or how do you call it, trusteeship that organizes ongoing places which are still not being decolonized. Yeah. So this is a vision of a new world order. And so saying that it's a grievous crime against humanity is a political definition of what that new world order ought to be, and around the elements around which we're supposed to construct it around, I think.
Is reparation the same as paying back? And if it is paying back, is it going to be monetary payment? And who is going to be paid what? And who will do the payment?
So it's a very narrow view of reparation. I mean, if you look at the resolution, and I think so many people have not paid attention to it, that the question of compensation is very underemphasized in the resolution. Because one of the things that has been clear in terms of our negotiations has been the transatlantic slave trade was about the monetization of human lives. We cannot lead the global conversation around reparations with a monetized conversation around this.
So that's not a key focus.
So that's not a key focus of this conversation. Now, what has been important to us? One, the return of historical artifacts that are continuing to sit in Western museums that they refuse to bring back to where they belong. It's a huge part of this. The conversations around knowledge and history building around the impact of the transatlantic slave trade and its impact on the world is a key part of this. So if you look at most of what the conversation has been, it's taking stock, is building our research and knowledge around this, and also be able to understand how does this affect global relations, whether or not in terms of the multilateral trade rules under the WTO, whether in terms of, and I think that former president, for instance, I'm championing, even in terms of credit rating agencies, how we reshape the global economic order is a key part of the reparative justice framework. Okay. Now, we have done this before, right? When African states became independent in the 60s, the new international economic order was built around this language of justice. Now, we're getting back into those ideas that have been lost in the intervening period that the structural adjustment programs took us off course. that we are getting back into those conversations and say, okay, what world do we imagine for ourselves? A world where the global responsibility towards each other is enlightened. And we saw fragments of that break, particularly during the pandemic and COVID, that it became each for themselves, where the global burden of what the pandemic presented, many countries were then hoarding vaccines and all kinds of things. It's a very particular narrow view of how the world should relate to each other. And I think this is what this is shifting us towards.
So put us on the same table. Okay. As a student of history and reading the transatlantic slave trade, I see it's a triangle. So Europeans come to Africa, carry slaves and resources, take them to the Americas. Okay, take slaves to the Americas and bring resources to Europe. So that's how it happens. You are the man who represents Europe here in Ghana. Europe, or the European countries who are the architect of the slavery, abstained at this vote. Why did you take that position?
So, first of all, thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity today to explain the European position. Secondly, I want to congratulate you on the diplomatic success the passage of this resolution constitute. It's important for me to stress that in the UN General Assembly context, there's around 350 resolutions that are passed every year, and on the vast majority, EU and Ghana are aligned. Now, on this particular resolution, I fully understand the political significance. The moral underpinnings of this resolution are very much aligned with the European Union's views and that of member states. When we were amongst the 52 who abstained instead of the 123 that voted in favor, it is because of a couple of issues in the actual text and not so much on the substance. I think that what our experts in New York suggested is that the ranking of heinous crimes against humanity is legally not making sense. So to qualify the slave trade or the transatlantic slave trade and slavery as the gravest crime is not a language that we can subscribe to. We would certainly agree that it is amongst the gravest crimes.
But it is not the greatest.
It's not the greatest. It's amongst the gravest.
So you agree that it's a crime against humanity?
I fully agree that it is an atrocity that could qualify as a crime had it been illegal at the time. Now, there is another issue in that, and that is exactly that of legality. I think in international law, it doesn't make sense to have a retroactivity of laws. At the time the atrocities took place, they were not illegal. They were inhumane. We agree that they are terrible, terrible events. We agree that they left a legacy. We certainly agree that this legacy should be addressed.
So you are doing a ranking, and the president of Ghana said this was not just a crime against humanity, and it was not just grave, it was the gravest of all grave crimes against humanity. You are saying that you agree it was a crime, but you wouldn't rank it at the gravest. Is there another crime against humanity that the European Union believes should rank higher than this?
No. I think legally it doesn't make sense to rank crimes against humanity. I think that we are dealing with human people indeed, and the humanities are faced in different ways. You can say this covered a long period of 400 years, this covered a great number of people, but how to compare it with Holocaust, how to compare it with the millions of people that were killed under Stalin's terror regime in the Soviet Union. I'm certainly not fit for that, but more importantly, international law does not allow for this kind of ranking. And therefore, in a resolution, which is a text voted by the member states of the UN, it should comply with international law also.
So your point is that at the time this crime was committed, there was no law that says it was illegal.
Yes.
At the time Hitler did what he did in Germany, was there a law that said it was illegal?
Of course.
So that is why you would agree that the Holocaust or whatever Hitler did was illegal and criminal, but what the slave masters did 400 years ago was not illegal and criminal because there was no law.
No. I admit slavery is amongst the most
heinous atrocities and crimes against humanity, but it's among the most. It's among the gravest. I will not qualify it as the gravest in the context of the resolution because legally it is not applicable.
You said that you understand the political underpinnings around this. The picture that is painted is that the former slave masters do not want to agree, and slave masters here being the continental Europe, the countries that came from there to do the colonization, the slavery, all of that, that the people who were engaged in the slavery, when it got to it, stepped out of the room and said they will not acknowledge what happened was wrong.
I think it's a biased presentation. I listened well to our friend here who referred to Rubio on one hand, Carney at the other, but the Europeans, we have been trying to engage constructively, also in New York, in the debate around this resolution. We have come up with a couple of suggestions. They have not been taken on board. This is fine. I understand the rules of the game, but what I'm saying is we did not vote against. We abstained for very clear reasons.
Okay.
It does not mean, however, that we do not support the moral underpinnings of this resolution. It does not mean that we don't want to engage in a forward-looking, unified approach to address the legacy of slavery. It does not mean, because this inscribes itself in a long development, it does not mean that we have not addressed this legacy in the past also.
Professor Gavwa, you are a professor of heritage studies. You know the history around this. You've heard the two arguments across the table. You've heard Oliver Vomawa's agenda, which they prosecuted at the UN, which was successful. You've heard the Europeans' position. What is your view?
My view is that for now, 123 nations of the world are not just insane to recognize the resolution put forth that the enslavement and trading of Africans was the gravest crime against humanity, because there's no other crime that can be compared to this. For 155 years, the Portuguese were here prosecuting this trade. The Dutch were here for 235 years. The Danes were here for about 185 years prosecuting the trade, and many more. The Germans did their thing. If you take the situation where over 50 million people were enslaved on the continent itself, okay, many a time our minds go onto those who were taken away, those who were enslaved and shipped out of the continent. But the number of people that were enslaved here on the continent also counts. Colonization of the continent was just an extension of that enslavement, because we had no legal rights during that period, we had no political rights, and we were coerced physically, psychologically, emotionally on the continent. The legacies are still with us today. I can understand the position of those who voted against and those who abstained using the law, but did Africans participate in the framing of that law? The fact that we were not part of the framers of the law that suggested that enslavement and trading of humans were legal means that the playing field was not level at the time, and it's still not level today.
So because the victim did not have a say in the law that says they can be victimized, you cannot today say that there was a law that protected our trade, and so it was just business.
That is my position, because I am not a lawyer to know the nitty-gritties of the law. But from the layperson's point of view, which I share, is that we were not part of it at all, and that was unfair.
So this was the only opportunity to be a part of it now?
This is the only opportunity, and I'm glad and proud of the President of the Republic of Ghana, the representatives of the Foreign Ministry, who worked together to bring this to the fore at the United Nations. And I commend all those nations that recognize this. The point is, at this stage, we are not talking about who is to blame for what happened. Okay? We are saying that it is about time the world recognize this and we move forward. How to repair this damage is another issue that we have to pursue.
In repairing the damage, you need the one who caused the damage to be at the table. If the one who caused the damage says, I do not recognize this damage to the extent that you claim it is, and so I'm walking out, how significant would this damage or this reparation be then? Because the repairers say that they don't agree that there was something up to the level that you claim it was for the reparation to be done. Am I misquoting you? Because I notice you're making faces. Yes, talk to me.
Yes.
What have I said wrong?
So, first of all, we are not walking away. We are abstaining from the resolution.
Yes, you walked out.
We engaged constructively before. We intend to engage constructively after. We have been physically present here in Ghana for over 50 years. Through the different EU ACP conventions, we have channeled significant amounts of development assistance, doing exactly what the Honorable Minister Blakwa has asked for, not individual compensations, but addressing the inequalities and the community development needs that have been left behind the transatlantic slave.
But you abstaining from the vote doesn't mean you are non-committed.
That is not walking away.
It's not as if you are non-committed. You have taken a position. Not voting is also voting, which means you disagree.
Voting against is voting. Voting for is voting. Abstaining is saying we would have loved to vote for, but then we need to compromise on the language.
So now that you did not vote, would you implement
we abstained.
Yes, that means you did not vote.
No, they voted by abstaining.
Okay, so you voted not to.
Because there's a way to vote. There are three ways to vote. To vote for, against, or abstain.
Okay. My question is that you abstaining, does it mean you are willing to work with whichever side wins, and now it is a yes that won? So will you work with a yes?
Not at all. It means, in this concrete case, it means that we are sorry that we could not agree on a unifying text. I think relatively small elements of the text could have been adjusted and ensure a much broader support. That didn't happen. But as I said before, it does not mean that we don't support the moral underpinnings of this resolution.
Prof, and I'm still interested. So if the European Union abstained, how can we prosecute this reparation? Because you need them. And if they say that there's a tweak, there's language should have been tweaked in a certain manner and that did not happen, then it means it's much ado about nothing. We have won, but we haven't won.
Hearing that the European Union is not totally against the resolution, it's a positive to some extent. But Europe or America should not lead the process of reparation. We have to repair on our own terms. We must lead the process of restitution and reparation. They say, who feels it knows it, Rita Mali and co. We are the ones that have felt it and still feel it. We must identify what the legacies have cost us and still with us today, and begin the reparation process here, the process of repairing the damage. We have to identify what hit us and then begin efforts to repair. When we start repairing, then the process of healing will come. Healing amongst ourselves first, and then between us and then our neighbors to the north.
Okay.
Europe may come in when they are sincere, or if they are sincere, because donor aid and so on, what they've been doing so far is just to keep us at the same position. They've been doing this for years. We can say we are very grateful, but what do we have to show for it?
You want more than that?
We want more than that. We should develop, we should repair on our terms.
Okay.
Not that they should lead the charge of reparation.
Okay. I'll let you rebut. I want to get someone who agrees with you to an extent to join the conversation. Manesseh Awuni, you are on social media and you say that you don't think that the reparation should happen. Are you saying that you also don't recognize slavery as the grievous crime against humanity, or your position is a little different from what the European Union's position is? You are a journalist.
Well, thank you. I must say I don't agree with him. I don't agree with the European Union. I agree substantially with the positions that on the position of facts that our side has advanced, I agree that the Europeans institutionalized and provided the incentives for the trade to thrive. I agreed they exploited the slaves in some of the most cruel manner. And as part of my course, I saw a documentary titled Slavery in Another Name. And this shows you that long before, even after the slavery was abolished in the US here, they still did very cruel things. I agree that it is the gravest crime against humanity. And I support the important point Professor Gavois has made about the legality at the time. A thief who goes to steal makes laws to protect his stealing cannot tell us that stealing was legal, because the victim of the theft wasn't part of the stealing. I agree that President Mahama and the Foreign Ministry did a great job and they deserve commendation. I agree that there should be payments of reparation. They've spoken about reparations in many forms. I followed this debate, the AU level and all. And this is the first time I'm hearing that there may not be monetary payments. It is not yet clear, but in the past, we've even heard suggestions about setting an African-wide account or whatever, reparation accounts and all of that. So I agree with many of the things, or almost everything. The only disagreement I have had is that if there are to be payment of reparations, it should go to the direct victims, as in those who were captured and taken out of the continent. And I said so because literature abound, and this is, on the history of it, we agree on the facts substantially. But literature abounds that if you came to the African continent, and this is a position the former President Kufuor held when he was in office. During the Ghana at 50, there was the Joseph Project. So the disagreement on my part is that if there are to be any reparatory payments, those of us in Africa should not receive it. The reason I made or I came to this is informed by certain views I hold. One, it is a fact that we participated or we were involved massively in capturing and selling of the slaves. And if you read a history of the indigenous slavery in Ghana from the 19th to the 15th to the 19th century by Professor Akosua Pebi, a lot of it is documented, how we did it in war, through the slave market, and then raids and many other avenues. So the point I have been making is that if we were so much involved, then it is about time we also acknowledged our role honestly. A country such as Benin, known as Dahomey, has officially apologized for its role. And the argument from those who oppose this view is that, well, the institution was such that we didn't have any agency, we didn't have any control, they built a system and we merely participated, so you cannot blame us. I was having an argument with a historian who knows more than I, and he was talking about how everything started, and he made a very important point, even though we disagree, that the very first castles that were built on the coast of Ghana were built without citizens of the Gold Coast participating, because the Europeans wanted them to build or use their labor for free. So they asked their chief, can you give us your people to help us? And the people said, no, if you don't compensate us adequately, we are never going to take part in the building of these castles. So according to him, they had to go all the way to the Gambia to bring people, and I think the second castle, they went to bring some people from Nigeria in the Igbo land. And then when Ghanaians started and they were even paying them in subsequent times, he said there was a standoff at a point because the locals demanded that the pregnant women who took part should be paid twice. So if later on we started taking part in the slave trade, I do not believe that we lacked agency completely. We also have evidence that not all the kingdoms or people in Africa took part. Some actually fought and resisted the enslavement of their people, meaning that there were conscionable people who thought that, look, this wasn't good. And also, I recently heard a video, or I saw a video of the Asante Hene who had visited, I think, one of the Caribbean states, and said, someone asked him, why did you sell us? And his response was that even today, with all our enlightenment and our education, we still have them controlling us. How much more 400 or so years ago? Can you imagine what would have happened?
Manesseh, so are you saying that pay reparation, but not to everybody? How do you even track those who were victims? That's one. Secondly, contribution is what your position is, that we contributed. But if there was no market, there wouldn't be a seller, right? So that if there's a guy buying, knowing that this is a product of illicit trade, he is a major guy. Because if he didn't bring the money to buy, there will be no one selling to him. How do you marry those two?
Yes, it's just like saying that I come to City FM and I see your boss and give him a lot of money, money he cannot refuse, and the incentives, and say that it's your sander, I want to buy sander, so take this money, I have the mechanisms to, when I capture him, ship him to wherever I want to go, he takes this money and then delivers sander. Of course, I initiated it. There are no two ways about it. I did all the groundwork. I created a demand. But if he delivers sander to me and I take sander, goes to maltreat sander, and later on sander's descendants begin to complain, and the whole world agrees that that act was cruel, I don't think that we should say that, oh, Sanders' boss didn't have any option, because there were many others who had the option and they didn't take part. Some didn't take part. Some fought against it. So in terms of the proportionality of the blame, it cannot be the same.
Okay. So who should be compensated?
My view is that those who were sent away, the Caribbeans and the others, because when we are talking about compensation, Prof. Gavua also made a very important point about what even happened in Africa. What about those smaller kingdoms who were attacked and their artifacts looted? What happened to them?
Okay, so compensate Jamaica, compensate Barbados, but
compensate the African Americans, compensate those
Haiti and the rest. But this is a question. The argument is made that you took the strong men of the continent to go and work on sugarcane plantations in the Americas. And because of that, Africa as a continent is behind in terms of development, and that if the strong working men were still around, our continent wouldn't be where it is currently. You do not agree with that view? And for that matter, Africa should be compensated.
It is worse than just the strong men. I have read some research that suggests that the inherent mistrust on the continent of Africa is partly due to the slave trade, that people and communities and kingdoms were raided. So for a long time, they are unable to just trust their neighbors. So it is beyond just this one. But the point is, at the time, whether it was so-called legal or illegal, those kingdoms that marched people to the coast to sell, they made money. In the book I referenced, I think on page 32, it talks about, for instance, the Achim state, which at the time initially said they weren't going to partake in the selling. So mainly, they were naturalizing their slaves.
Okay, all right.
And one chief came and said that they should change that policy, and henceforth, an Achim caravan going to the coast could carry as much as 2,000 slaves. And this was a major source of revenue to their economy.
Very well. Thank you, Manesseh. I'll come back to you. Honorable John Darko, you've listened to the conversation around the table. You've heard the various angles. As a lawmaker, the legality matter has been raised. We have gone to win big at the UN, but does it afford the continent anything? There's a view that, no, don't give the people who engage in the crime any proceed because they are as guilty as the ones who were doing the buying. What's your position?
Well, thank you very much. I must first of all say that the President and his team, they've done a good job, and this obviously started by, at least you can say, in the recent history, the former president, therefore, worked so hard to bring us to this level. The AU, which declared 2025 as a year, for justice for African and people of African descent through reparation. So a lot of work has been done, and we must thank the people who got involved in all of this. What can come out of it? Yesterday, when the resolution was passed, I asked myself, okay, so what's next? And that is the question I guess you're asking me. I believe that this is where it's going to end. The people who were really involved stood out. America voted against, the Europeans chickened out.
Israel.
And Israel also voted against. I mean, Israel, I don't even know why, but I was expecting Israel to vote in support of this because of the obvious reasons. But this is where we are. Who is going to pay what? I don't think that Americans are going to pay anybody. Europeans are not going to pay anybody back because, as we saw, they decided to walk out of the room. But it's good that this is recognized as the gravest crime against humanity. I don't think that there can be any other crime superseding this.
Not the Holocaust.
Definitely not. I mean, look at the people involved. If you look at the numbers, Holocaust, we're talking about 6 million or so. This is way more than that. And look at the number of years. Look at the inhumane treatment that people of African descent went through. So it is good that we've managed to get the world to come to this conclusion that this is wrong and this is a grievous crime against humanity. I don't believe anything will come out of it. I think what we have to do as Africans is to fight on our own. At this point, we must always decide that our destiny is in our hands, because the way the world's economic architecture has been drawn from the over 150 years ago clearly disadvantaged Africans.
So we should fight our own fight?
I think so. I believe that is a good thing.
You don't think anything tangible will come out of this that will prop us up in any way?
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's why I first of all thank them for what they've done. But really...
so the optics, nice, but beyond that?
Beyond that, nothing is going to come out of it. Because look, who is going to make the payment? Look, even the artifacts, okay? The argument
returning
about the artifacts. Recently, they returned some few artifacts to Asante.
Yeah,
and
but it's even on loan.
It's even on loan.
It's for years, for a period.
And we have to go back. the West is not ready to admit that they caused this harm to us and that they are ready to repair. They are not ready to do that. They have benefited from the sweat of Africans. They are living good lives because of what they did to Africans. They are not ready to move beyond that.
Africans played a role. That's the other argument.
Yes, I mean, but they benefited. The West benefited.
Africans also benefited. They gave us snuff, gave us mirrors, gave us brandy. So we also benefited. At the time, it was barter trade, right? And that was a commodity, the value of a person.
I mean,
and that's why the ambassador says it was not illegal at the time. It was legal business.
Well, I mean, I think that Prof answered Ambassador. Ambassador is making a case for his region, but I think that argument doesn't fly at all. I mean, imagine sitting in Europe and we are making rules, to govern some African living his quiet life in a village. And you, because you legalize it over there, you say that it should be legal here. I mean, how is that even possible? So it's a good thing for the optics, but in terms of tangible outcomes, I have my doubts. Nothing is going to come out of it. Africans must fight the battle to free ourselves from the economic shackles that this whole slave trade has put us in.
So we should move on.
I think we should move on.
Alhaji Yunus Hussaini, should we move on or we should keep pushing?
Well, so the conversation largely has been, if you want, misdirected to some extent. And let me congratulate Oliver and the team, President, Minister for Foreign Affairs, and his team who went to the UN General Assembly to achieve this feat. But mobilizing an international community around an issue of foundational justice is not easy. What they did in international law is establishing a normative principle of international law. That's what they have done. A normative principle of international law. That now there is an authoritative voice of 123 nations declaring slavery as the gravest crime against humanity. Authoritative. And that's how international norms are created. It doesn't really matter that Europe abstained. In the establishment, in the declaration, a resolution to establish the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, America abstained. But the court is operating. That's a normative principle of international law. Now, driving out of the declaration, when the International Declaration of Human Rights, countries abstained. That's how normative principles are established at international law. That's how they are. So we must all accept that what has happened is really historic. That for the first time, there is an authoritative declaration at the United Nations that slavery perpetuated against people of African descent is the gravest crime against humanity.
So it's become international law.
Yes, you can now refer to it. It's a resolution. Now, I hear the argument, and also the United States representative at the UN made that argument. He incited use Kujan. Yeah. I mean, go back, Ambassador, from the days of Hugo Grucius up to Jeremy Bentham. International law has been a law relating the relationship between nations. Which nations were in Africa at the time slavery was done?
None.
So how do you rope us into a universal system that didn't apply to us as states? Were we states then? We're not. So how do you rely on international law to justify the taking of slaves from Africa to when states were non-existent in Africa? The argument is flawed. But even recently, the American representatives cited use code and preemptory rules of international law. Slavery, genocide are preemptory rules. Even if you go a modern day, rendition of that, it's definitely not acceptable. Now, so yes, reparations can come in different forms. And I agree entirely with Bakavoma that this is not start today. It has been an ongoing conversation. And we Africans, and that's why when you go back to our OAU Charter on people's and human rights, our rights are communal based. That's why when we are pouring libation, Ambassador, we invoke our ancestors. What has happened brings closure to those ancestors of ours who were hard done by slavery. And it establishes a link between us and those who were taken away from the continent. So for us, this is of consequence. It's of consequence to us as a people.
So it gives cultural closure.
Closure. The whole thing.
But if you want to move forward with it, and
that is why
as significant as Europe,
I should tell Manesseh when he says those who benefited. That's an European conception of harm. It's individualistic. So even though slavery was, slaves were exploited for the benefit of the state, even in America today, to be able to establish, that to benefit from any arrangement that compensates you as a descendant of a slave, they must trace the root because it's individualistic. We Africans.
It doesn't work like that here.
It doesn't work like that.
You touch
here.
one, you touch all.
All. That's how we work. That's how Africans. That's
so
how well.
So it should be continent-wide.
Wide.
Or nation-wide.
No, it's continent.
Continent-wide.
That's why.
But he says.
That's why, for the first time, 56 African nations
agreed.
Were united in their belief that this is the way.
But Manesseh says, target the Caribbeans, target the Black Americans. They are the ones who suffered directly. They can trace it to their great-grandfather who was put in a ship and moved from Elmina all the way to only God knows where. But not you, Inusa Fuseni, who is in Ghana, who was not affected in any way from Tamale.
Those of our ancestors who could confer benefits on us, who were traded, who were moved to the United States, constituted a loss to us. Constituted a loss to us, whether within families or within nation states. And that's how we must look at it.
The absence of Europe or the decision of Europe to abstain, you have said we have the law has been established, but their absence, how significant or insignificant is that?
Well, what Europe did was also strategic. And you could see it from what the ambassador was saying. They can come back at a point in time where they, if they believe that the share in the development, so there's a workable agenda to be able to implement what we want to achieve under the resolution, they can always come back. That's why they abstained. It's strategic. Okay? Because sometimes you have to say, why did Europe abstain from the votes? About 2 or 3 weeks ago, Spain apologized to the Latin American countries for the inhumane treatment they meted out to them. The King of Spain did that. So a recognition and an acknowledgement of the fact.
So there's precedent.
No, I'm saying that there's precedent, even in Spain, in Europe.
Yes.
There's precedent.
So why haven't you, and I just want to hear from you, so if there's precedent and there's this issue of reparation that's happened, this is not just a recent matter. Why don't you latch onto that and say, oh, in the past we did it, so let's do this too. Just say we are sorry, and then perhaps that would be satisfying enough. You don't even have to give money, but Europe come together through your president of the European Union and say, We are sorry for what happened 400 years ago.
So, a couple of things. First of all, let me remind you that I started with congratulating Ghana on the passage of this resolution.
But not apologizing to Ghana.
Secondly, at the time, there was no EU. It is certainly not within our mandate, according to your arguments, to apologize on behalf of our member states. Thirdly, there are a number of member states who are apologizing, who are repatriating artifacts, who are working. I stated clearly, we support the moral underpinnings of this resolution. You say it was strategic of us to abstain. I could claim that it was a strategic choice not to listen to the few amendments we suggested to the resolution.
Because I mean, I will come on this. That's not absolutely correct.
I'll come on to him.
That being said, during the independence of Ghana, since '57, we have been supporting through the different frameworks, the EU ACP frameworks, the Yaoundé, the Lomé, the Cotonou, the Samoa
But the point has been made here that that's pittance.
No,
that's not what we need.
No, I'm not saying, if you qualify it as pittance, I hope that my European taxpayers don't hear that, because they don't feel it as pittance. And I can say that what we do it in collaboration with the subsequent governments that you have elected. And if you're not happy with it, they should be your voice to amend that.
That's fair.
Finally, the world is evolving, the EU is evolving, and we are actually trying to do exactly what you're asking, to put Africa on the map. We are trying to push for an African country being part of the G20. We are trying to get an African seat at the Security Council. We are doing exactly what you're asking for. We are your partner here. But we are not only partnering on moral issues. We also, and I have to comment on you saying that we give small money to keep you at the place you are. You're grateful for it, but it's not changing the world.
No, I haven't said that.
No,
you said it.
Said that.
I'm sorry, but we're the biggest investor in Africa. We're the biggest donor to Africa, and we are the biggest export market in Africa. And we have been trying to
using resources you took from Africa hundreds of years ago.
I don't know where the resources are coming from. I think it's a bit generous of you to say that everything comes from the slave trade. And I'm not sure that is well documented, but it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that we are with you on this. We're partnering. We are trying to address the legacies, the inequality, the structural deficiencies, the development issues that have arisen also from slave trade and colonialism later on, and we admit that.
I'll come back to you. I'll wrap up for me, so I'll go to Oliver.
So you see, what has happened is actually given Africa some level of agency and some in a voice. And it's establishing a kind of leadership in Africa. 1.4 billion people on the continent, 54 nations. We have 30 of the critical minerals required in this by nations for the development of electronics and other things. Now, what has happened will lead us into having uniform positions on how we manage our resources, on how we have a voice. For instance, today is our slavery. No one is talking about the eugenics that took place in Africa among the Herero people, where they were captured, where there was genocide, they were captured, beheaded, and their heads sent to Europe for scientific experimentation. No one is talking about that. Okay? No one is talking about how Cecil Rhodes came to Africa, a sick man, had pneumonia. He came to benefit from the sunshine of Africa and eventually became the owner of the most wealthy gold mine in Africa. Leopold in the Congo. where people were amputated for just harvesting. I mean, those who failed to harvest the rubber had their limbs amputated. Where the United States courts, in interpreting we, the Universal Creed, we the people, giving to ourselves a constitution, said it didn't include the black man, because the black man was 3/4 of a human being. Well, addressing a historical wrong, it will take time. But I believe that this normative culture in international law is going to take root, and it's going to address many. There could be many repercussions from this resolution. Okay. Because there were many injustices perpetrated against the African people.
Okay. Oliver, I noticed you wanted to correct some things. While you do that, I want you to also, yesterday I listened to the minority leader in Parliament, Afenyo Maki, and he said, listen, if there wasn't slavery in Africa, we wouldn't have sold. We were selling our own people anyway, and he used the word donko and said that we had slaves and even had names for them. So we can't pretend to be holier than thou in this matter. Yeah. Did you consider that when you went on this campaign? How do you address that plus the other issues that were discussed around the table?
Listen, the conversation around reparations, maybe I'm taking this point first, has been clear that this is not an us against them. If you look at the tenor and language of the resolution, it doesn't say though these people benefited, these people are victims. It calls for a holistic repair and calls on all member states to put in place frameworks for how we repair. That process of reparation was a conversation that engages us as well. And in fact, today, I think this morning, I put up a post that even the Kwesi Prempeh Committee on Constitutional Review talked about reparations that we must do. The recognition and recommendation for heritage citizenship, that people who are able to trace their DNA here would have the right to Ghanaian citizenship as a way of reopening the door for that continuous conversation. So the project of reparation is not a unique one-way traffic. At no point has this been suggested. Now the question of, the suggestion that there were certain proposals made which were not incorporated into the draft resolution. The core of this resolution, turns on two things. One, the recognition that this is a grievous crime against humanity, and two, recognizing that it was always a crime, and that this is not an attempt to reimpose law on the past. This is the core of the resolution. So if you say that these are your red lines, and that's the language that the European Union said, their red lines are that those two must be out of the document.
Which is the foundation.
Then essentially, we must just say that there was a Durban Declaration, or Accra Declaration, and other things in the past, and so what's the point of this resolution moving forward? Those are the critical elements of the resolution. Now let's engage that argument a bit more seriously. On the question of international law, it is not true that slavery and the transatlantic slave trade was legal in those days. Yes. It was not. Why were Europeans not being sent to the Americas? It is a question that Africans were dehumanized and not considered human. Not that slavery and the slave trade was legal. It was not legal. It is that we did not benefit from it because we were not human.
So the law didn't cover us.
So it's not that it was never the
states, we're not sovereign nations.
So that's clear. Two, Europe, when it came to after the Second World War, when Nuremberg was created, at no point was it ever recognized that individuals could be punished for the crimes of gay states. It was never part of positive international law. But it said no, the crimes and their nature were so heinous that there's no way that individuals that make up the states can say that this is the state and not me. And so we punished the Nazi officials. So even in positive international law and its development, we have made room for the most heinous crimes against humanity to recognize that it was always wrong, and you cannot run away from that. Now, in addition to the same conversation around this slavery issue, when you look at the role of the General Assembly, its role is to define the progressive development of law. Yeah. And so that even if you're coming into the conversation and say that we have a bit of difficulty there, it is about the now and how we reframe and atone for the past and making that conversation. Your hands are not bound when you're with the General Assembly. The General Assembly's role is to define how we define ourselves going forward. So if you come and say that there's something that has bound you and for which reason you cannot accept it, again, we are being a bit mischievous with language. Every time that the General Assembly has passed a resolution, is to be able to make room for how we develop as a people more generally. Then on the question of reparations, look at the resolution. When it comes to the question of compensation, it says that it is calling on good dialogue for how we put in place reparative justice framework, like apology, restitution. It says a general language.
And it's not binding.
It is not even,
is it legally
resolution
binding?
Is not binding, but the language in there itself is that you are inviting people to dialogue. What is enforceable about dialogue?
No.
So even if you can't find a way to come around to the question of can we have dialogue on this, then what is the problem? Now, the only point where the resolution uses stronger language that prompt, it says prompt and unhindered restitution of artifacts. How is that wrong? Even in law as it existed then until now, something that is taken and stolen from a people does not confer title ever. So if you then go into palaces and take artifacts and go away with them, you never gain legal rights to them. And I've never seen any argument anywhere that this was justly bought, as we're having even in terms of the slavery conversation.
It's just possessory right, not...
There was never any possessory right transfer.
I mean, the way the artifacts were taken doesn't confer.
I think that, listen, the European vote is something that they are going to explain for a long time. And listen, to be honest, we made every attempt to not put Europe in that position where they have to explain. We made last-ditch attempts. I can show you communication even between myself and other people, which is that you have to find a way to come into a year's vote on this. They took a blanket position and they stayed with that blanket position. I do not fault Europe on this. Of course, I would have wished differently. But the truth is, whatever reasons that they took to go this, I don't think that they were bound by some law and that we were violating law by putting forward this resolution. It's also not correct that we didn't listen to honest proposals for reform. In fact, in terms of the UN negotiation history, the silence, so once you're finished with the draft, it goes under the silence procedure. The silence was broken 3 times to go back and renegotiate this. So every attempt to find a way to get people along was done consistently. And it's not even about Europe. Even in terms of CARICOM, even in terms of Latin America, all the concerns that were raised, every attempt was made to modify the draft to be able to accommodate and bring people along as we go forward. The question was whether or not it was touching the essence of the resolution or other things.
So
now,
if you went to the root of the resolution,
then
it's not
there should have been no resolution
negotiable.
at all. In fact, I am even certain that even this was changed to one of the gravest, that may not even at the end of the day join it. It's done so many times where they find a way to water down the resolution and then at the end of the day abstain from it. They wouldn't have achieved anything great with it and they themselves are fine. They're not compelled. Nobody's compelled to vote in any particular way, even if they propose the full text. We've seen this. The US is notorious for this. They water down a resolution at the end of the day, abstain, not join, vote. It's fairly consistent. Now, the question of the ranking, it is again not correct in international law that there's no ranking in international law. The concept of jus cogens itself is a ranking of crimes in the first place. 2, and only because they give the example of the genocide, it's a conceptual misunderstanding. Genocide is different from crimes against humanity in international law. As a pure concept. What is within the bracket of crimes against humanity? Murder, rape, and things like that. We are saying that we cannot find a way to say that transatlantic slave trade is bigger in its magnitude than murder, and I don't know what that means. So genocide is its own category. And genocide, and I like the statement of the Russian Federation before the General Assembly, which is that we haven't even gotten to the conversation that the first genocide happened in Africa, in another example that we gave. This is not even about any of that. This is about, can we put in place a framework for dialogue? And then we didn't even call on them to do it. We said the African Union, the Latin America, CARICOM, and any other organization, regional organization that is willing to join, we join the framework for how we think about the framework for reparatory justice. So it doesn't do anything about that. It doesn't talk about financial transfers to anybody. It doesn't talk about creating an account. It just says that this was wrong and this is the grave. That's it.
The contribution of Africa and Africans, I want you to respond to that. And also the fact that Europe as a bloc abstained, and we may think of taking artifacts which are mostly in Europe. How does it work then when they didn't vote and it's not binding, then what's the point of getting the reparation through when the artifacts will not return?
I think that our position in...
But even though he has said that, they've done some contribution to the continent, they support. Since our independence, they've been here with us, EU development and all of these things.
You know, on the high-level panel the day before, the president quoted Martin Luther King where he said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it's always bends towards justice. It will take time. I have no... that eventually, in a way in which Europe continues to explain its votes, it may come to a point where they will say that we were wrong to have taken this position at some point.
I think so.
But it doesn't take away the burden on us to continue to push the conversation. It doesn't take the burden away from us to continue to advance the claims as we have done. It has taken how many years to get us here? In fact, when we were talking about the year of return, it was about 400 years right? So it's something that I don't think that our foreign policy is going to let go, just because at a moment in time and in history, countries which at points did not accept the humanity of the African, as later on came to accept it, and today are at the position in which they are. That's fine. We will continue to push it. Now, the African complicity in all of this, I have said consistently. I have congratulated in the past the Gamanche when we hosted the dialogue between Africa and Africans in diaspora, when he came out and apologized for the role of the GANs in this. I think that conversation we need to continue to internalize and how we bring our societies to accept and take account for, whether in terms of what we teach our children and how we, we accept our own role and how we understand this. It's a reckoning that we have to do. We're doing it for us not because of Europe, but for our own selves to heal and to be able to acknowledge the debt we owe to our ancestors. We have to do that. Okay. So in that conversation, I don't even know why it would be brought up, to shift the conversation around this. There's no denial of it. Africans have led the conversation about discovery of this. Professor Pebi and co have written on this. We are doing our own work. And what we are doing is that everybody else must look into themselves and do that work as well.
So what next after this? I'll come to you. What next after what happened in New York? What do we do
within
next?
the language of the resolution itself, it is inviting the African Union, CARICOM, and Latin America to begin the process of implementing and defining the reparatory justice frameworks. It has also called on states towards their own laws, to reform their own laws, to how you'll be able to account and repair. So it means that we must also begin to audit our laws and say, in what ways can we take into more account how we repair? It means that in terms of also the frameworks around the restitution of artifacts, it means that we must go into the next project of proposing
dialogue.
A convention.
So this is a dialogue.
A convention for how we, the framework for how we do the return of artifacts.
Okay.
I know that some countries are even demanding for an advisory opinion from the ICJ on this. I'm not one in favor of it, but the entire process for the implementation is continuous conversations and dialogue about elaboration. Since it's going to come in, let me make a quick point about something he said. And, even we as Africans, as much as we understand the value of this, there's a level of pessimism because we haven't seen, even how it would look like or be able to imagine what it looks like. And so it is fair that, when we come to it, we say, we don't see anything changing. But I want to be clear. What changes is not only the monetary aspects, that because some people are not going to monetize it or bring money, it means that the hard political work of healing cannot take place, and that is not worth of its own. So that in itself is also worthy. You understand? And whether other things catch up with it doesn't take away from that aspect of the work as well.
Okay. Okay, so good point. And it's a very good conversation we're having here. So yesterday I was having a conversation with some gentlemen, and this issue came up. Young men. And one of them told me that, look, you politicians, you are talking about these big issues. Today, if a ship comes here, all of us will go. And I'm sure we've all heard that before. And that strikes at the very heart of the conversation. What have we done since all these issues came up? Right now in Africa and in our country, the youth of this country are all rushing to get out of the country because they think that it is greener out there. And it's not just only Ghana, all over Africa. The Europeans who forced us to go to their countries to go and work are now saying that we don't even want you in our country. If you want to apply for visa, there are requirements that a normal African gentleman cannot even fulfill. And so for me as a lawmaker, my worry is that this argument will go on, but at the end of the day, the young man in Abosokai or in Swami, my constituency, is looking at me and is asking himself, what does this mean to me? Today, if I get opportunity, I will travel. So it behoves on us leadership to build our country. If we are going to rely, we can wait for the next 400 years, nothing will happen. We have to take our destiny into our own hands. We should never continue to believe that the West will make our lives better. We can fight for what belongs to us, especially the artifacts, but that some form of compensation will come that will change the destiny of Africa or black, community It's not going to happen.
You don't see that happening.
It's not going to happen. And so African governments must work hard to better the lot of these people. And I think that if we accept that as a first step, it will help us. I mean, it will calm us down. And that is what I told the person who asked me this question, that I think you're right. It is the responsibility of the government to make life better here. What is gone is gone. Let's focus on building a better future for the next generation.
Prof, I'll come to you. Let me hear from Alaji. He's a politician, so since they said you have to fix the country,
I just want to assure that many things are happening in the international community, in the world presently, and there's some level of deglobalization. And he referred to McCartney. The rapture is a manifestation of deglobalization. The rule-based order is crashing. An African agency is emerging. What happened at the UN is an African agency. This rule-based order was imposed on us and kept us perpetually subjugated. And until we find that agency to extricate ourselves from that rule-based agency and also call the shots and determine what we want for ourselves, we're not going to be able to make it. Now, Ambassador says, look, we contribute to Africa. Why is it that we are interested in contribution, in aid, when the resources of Africa, harnessed properly and put to use for the benefit of Africa, can develop Africa? Why do you think that we should need aid? So, I think that African agency is manifesting itself. And what is happening? Look at what is happening in the Gulf states. Well, Africa is not part of it, but Africa is suffering the brunt of what is happening over there. We're not part of it. Okay? We're having to pay a lot for fuel. We're having to have food insecurity. But we are not. Global warming. The industries are not in Africa. But we have had to suffer the consequences of the industrialization of Europe and the Americans. So there is a lot. But until we take our sovereignty seriously, until we exercise an agency in a sense of what we want for ourselves, we will not be able to extricate ourselves from a global system that imposes rules on us.
I'll come to the 250 rapper. I want to hear from Azure. Azure, do you agree that, yes, we have gone to do this, but nothing much is going to change? Or you are positive that, and again, you have your view, you think that the reparation should happen, you have people you think should be done, this reparation should be done to them, but the fact that Europe was not there, the return of the artifacts, and all of the repairing that we are hoping would happen, do you foresee that happening? Or you want to agree with Honorable John Daku that, listen, what the animals have eaten, let them eat and go. What is left, Yembo Humai?
I agree with both. The stolen artifacts, let's not even call them the artifacts they have to return. This is theft. And it is ridiculous how the British say what has been taken cannot be returned. And I hear that what they've returned is just a loan. I'm waiting for the day when any man born of a woman would go to, let's say, Asante Hene's palace and say, we are coming for the artifacts.
The ones that were brought?
Yes, they were stolen and they've been brought back.
But the agreement was that...
see anybody allowing them to come.
But the agreement was you are bringing it on loan, you return it. I mean, that was they didn't go to forcefully take. They took it based on an agreement. You can't bring it and change the law and say, I will return it again. That cannot happen.
Well, that is if the thief had an agreement to take it. Whether I don't foresee this happening. There are certain things that we should even. I'm
not sure Manesseh would agree with you. I'm not sure Manesseh will agree with you on this, but you proceed because that would be a different matter.
I would be very surprised if Manesseh allows these artifacts to go back. But that is just by the way.
Okay.
On John Darko's point, I tend to believe that in as much as these things are important, they also raise very important issues for self-introspection. And that is why I'm against those who want to shut everyone up and say, let's push only one conversation. I grew up in Ketekrachi Lakeside. That is where I grew up. And slavery is ongoing. It was
modern day slavery.
Ongoing.
Modern day slavery.
Exactly.
In the canoes.
Where children, some as young as 10 years, 8 years.
Less, 5.
Yes, are taken They are sent to their slave masters, their parents are paid, and these children are maltreated. There was one that we witnessed. He came back from fishing with his arm broken. The initial report was that he was walking on the canoe and slipped. Later, he confided in us that his master hit him with that wooden thing they use for paddling. Yes, and it broke his arm. These are things that we have witnessed. And the point I'm trying to make is that if we allow these opportunities to raise these conversations, we should be able to look inwards and say, look, what they did was very bad, but what did we also do and what are we doing? We have the Chinese ambassador looking us in the eye and saying to us that if you did not give the Chinese the visa, if you did not take them to the gold mining sites, how would the Chinese come and destroy your forest? When we're saying, oh, tell your people they are destroying our forest. And this is the same principle that operated. On these artifacts, it's very good they return them. Whatever they've stolen, if there's a way to get them to return it, I am all in favor of it. But there are more important thing we should be looking at. If we are saying bring this artifact, which is symbolic but a wood carving, and you have someone like Abacha alone stealing as much as $5 billion, taking it out. The oil minister recently stole hundreds of millions, and some Europeans and Americans are bringing the money back. I don't think that if we managed our affairs well, we would be getting some sermons that we are helping you with aid, we are doing this. No. What we steal and take out is more than, you can't even compare it to the pittance we get as aid. So
the ambassador said, don't let the taxpayer of Europe hear that you are describing it as pittance. It's very significant.
I'm comparing it with how much we steal and take out.
Okay.
That is what
our political class.
Not just the political class. We tend to just look at politicians as the only problem, but I have been doing anti-corruption work, and I also know that even if you ask me, the most corrupt Ghanaian is not a politician, he's a businessman. That is in my view.
Okay.
We have private individuals, so it is our collective responsibility to say that, look, we are not respected across the world. Why? Because nobody respects beggars. Why are we begging?
Very well.
When COVID came, we went begging for vaccines. But when others were investing in vaccines, we were building cathedrals. So let's begin to take our lives seriously and let this humiliation that we suffered, that we are being reminded of, engineer us to do things differently. So I agree with Mr. John Darkon's position.
Prof, I want to hear you. You wanted to say something on this wrap up for us.
First, irrespective of the character of the resolution, it has been passed. Yeah. Where do we move from there? You see, we are talking about we have to do this, we have to get our home right. If you don't know what hit you, you don't know how to repair that damage. Okay? That is why this resolution passed is good. It sets the pace. Reparation and restitution are not events. They are mutually interrelated, but they are processes. And the process has been enhanced by the passing of this resolution. What do? We have to increase the dialogue, the public outreach for people to understand the essence of this whole resolution, and then how we manifest it. Restitution, we're talking about restitution. It is highly important. I happen to chair the Ghana's focal team on restitution. And we have been working with colleagues on the continent, across the continent, and in Europe. The point I keep on making is this. When we restitute, it will mutually benefit Africa and even Europeans. Because the damage done to us here is one, but Europeans have also damaged themselves mentally. In the sense that, why would I be seen in the streets of maybe Rome or London, and then because somebody has a lighter pigmentation, we think that because I'm from Africa, he is much more better placed in the world than me. or I'm stupid. It is a mental damage. Number two, if we don't repair this damage collectively, Europeans don't participate in repairing the damage on their terms, and we Africans do it. What is going on will continue. My colleague talked about if they were to bring a boat here, people will flock. Why? Because we are all products of the same system. The politicians who are stealing money are products of the same educational system. They all go to the same schools. We have not yet transformed that colonial curriculum very much. We still go to the same churches that tell us that there is a white young man there who is pious and is your Lord and Savior. We do that every day. So you see somebody with a lighter skin and you say, oh, my Lord is here. Okay? We haven't changed that mentality. We are still against each other because I speak Ewe or somebody speaks Dagbani. I'm better than the person who speaks Dagbani and vice versa. These are all legacies of what we went through, which we must confront here on the continent by ourselves. Then our colleagues outside, they want to be partners. I keep hearing the word partner. If you want to be a partner, then we must plan together, execute together, and then the benefits will be mutual. You don't plan out there and come to us and say we want to be partners. Maybe it's collaboration, and we don't want to be collaborating today in things that will be against us. The boat has started sailing. We have to join in. The point about we started it, we were enslaved. We did not dehumanize ourselves. People acquired from other families, incorporated them.
Integration. The people forget it.
Okay. But chattel slavery dehumanized people, transformed people into cargo.
Are you sure we did not? We walked them in caravans, in chains and shackles from the north
go
down
to
south.
That was the period of chattel slavery. Chattel slavery. Okay? It's not what we refer to as Africans were also trading long before Europeans came. The Arabs were there in East Africa, Tanzania. That's why we had the Maji Wars and so on and so forth with the Germans. The Arabs started, the Germans came in Togoland. The Germans were there, so-called punitive wars against the local people. They went to Karachi, beheaded the priest, the high priest, took things from his palace. Okay, many missionaries came here pretending to be cleansing us of demons that were embedded in our artifacts, many of which are the souls of our communities, and then took them away. Okay, so this is the time for us to reflect, and our leadership has set the pace for us, and the conversation does not stop around this table. It enhances the dialogue, it enhances deliberation on what we should be doing. The academic institutions must lead. What are we teaching? What are we learning? What are we impacting to society? Our media people should reflect. What are we propagating? What are we recycling? Are we recycling the same jaundice knowledge system that is keeping us down, or what?
Okay. So we have to change the mind. Ambassador,
because we are now, the chain is on the mind. We've been enslaved mentally. And sometimes I say we are on autopilot. We don't even know where we are going. Okay? Today is Malaysia, we rush there. Tomorrow is Germany, we rush there. Next time is China, we rush there. Who are we? This is why the resolution is important. To restore our dignity as a people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ambassador, you abstained, but it's been passed. So what will be the level of involvement of the European Union moving forward in the dialogue, in the reparation, the return of artifacts? What will be the position moving forward?
So we abstain, but not because we disagree with the substance of the resolution. I feel that this morning, no matter what I say, it can be misconstrued as something that is not enough, that's something that is our mistake at the outset, that's something that could be done better. We do as well as we can. We try to help Africa